Welcome to Jurassic Park. This line is one of the most iconic in film history. For nearly 30 years now, the series has become synonymous with pop culture and the big screen. Mention the words dinosaur movie and most will immediately point to the following 5 films. With the 6th release coming out this month, it's time to look back at the complete series. How do the films hold up and where do they sit as cinematic blockbusters? I'm about to find out. Jurassic Park, the pioneering blockbuster. It all started back in 1990 when American author Michael Crichton wrote the titular book. Several studios immediately jumped on the potential for converting it into a feature-length film, including director Steven Spielberg. Many changes to the narrative and characters would be made in the transition. Dinosaurs had been on the silver screen many times before, but their representation was held back by outdated predictions and limited technology. Stop motion with occasional puppets was the way to go for filmmakers, but all of that changed in 1993 when Spielberg's adaptation arrived, a colossal blockbuster that redefined the cinematic landscape the same way Jaws did 2 decades earlier. I can't remember the first time I saw Jurassic Park, but being a massive fan of dinosaurs, it left a big impact on me. From the moment you first see the towering Brachiosaurus, Jurassic Park casts a wondrous spell on you, and combined with the soundtrack from John Williams, it creates this majestic tone. Through a combination of groundbreaking CGI and real-life puppets, Jurassic Park led the way, moving these mighty animals out of the B-movie scene and into worldwide acclaim from audiences. Just about every sequence in the film is both tense and memorable. No viewer could ever forget the moment the T-Rex burst out of its paddock and laid waste to the safari vehicles. The creeping dread, the sound design, the seamless blend of practical and computer effects, it set a template for the prehistoric reptiles that was very tough to beat. From that point on, the set pieces pile on at a great pace. Nedry's deadly encounter with the Dilophosaurus, running from the Gallimimus herd, and the vicious entrance of the Velociraptors in the 3rd act. Just about every tool and animal in Jurassic Park gets a piece of the action, and this keeps you on the edge of your seat. The dinosaurs may be the main stars, but Jurassic Park doesn't forget about other elements either. The characters are very well defined and above all else, interesting. Sam Neill's Alan Grant has a stubborn, introverted personality that slowly changes into a paternal instinct, while Ian Malcolm is both playful and calculating, commenting on the inherent flaws of running a dinosaur theme park. Richard Attenborough's appearance in the series is mostly limited to this film, and you can see the added dimension he brings. John Hammond is very much a Walt Disney type. He loves what he does and wants to share it with the world, but this also makes him blind and naive to the park's many faults. This scene where he talks to Ellie Sattler about the situation is a key moment at the halfway mark, as his personal faults are put on display. Laura Dern counters his optimism with a sobering dose of reality. Even the side characters like the park ranger Robert Muldoon and the technician Ray Arnold are still engaging because their characteristics are distinctive enough to shine through their lower screen time. Everyone has a role to play with no weak links in sight. Nowadays there's plenty to nitpick across the film's runtime, like the cliff drop that magically appears during the T-Rex escape, and even when watching as a kid, I was always baffled at this bit where Tim awkwardly stands behind Lex rather than grabbing the gun. Even with all these moments, the original JP is the only release that still holds up today. It quickly became the highest grossing film of all time, crossing over $1 billion against a $60 million budget. It has something that all of its sequels missed, the heart and charisma that complements the dinosaurs. Jaw-dropping special effects can only get you so far when the core elements are lacking, and we're about to see how the follow-ups made that mistake time and time again. The Lost World Jurassic Park, the mixed follow-up. With the monster success of Jurassic Park, a sequel followed 4 years later. Michael Crichton wrote a new book in 1995 which laid the groundwork for the cinematic version. Spielberg rarely does sequels, and with the exception of the Indiana Jones trilogy, they haven't worked out too well. This one is merely passable. When it arrived in 1997, the excitement was high, but many audiences left the theatre feeling less than impressed. At a younger age, The Lost World was shown less often than other entries. Video and DVD copies seemed rare at that time, and at one point I owned a tape with some behind-the-scenes footage. 4 years after the first film, Dr. Ian Malcolm ventures to Jurassic Park Site B to rescue his girlfriend Sarah while documenting the animals on behalf of an ailing John Hammond. At the halfway mark, things go sideways as InGen launches their own expedition, intent on bringing the dinosaurs to a new park in San Diego. The tone is certainly darker than the first, with perhaps the nastiest deaths in the series. Eddie Carr getting ripped apart by 2 T-Rexes and Carter getting stomped on is pretty gruesome. I'm surprised they got away with a PG rating. As the film moves into the final act, a massive plot hole rears its ugly head. Originally, a pack of raptors was supposed to kill the crew on the cargo ship, but this scene was cut and we were left with a problematic setup where the T-Rex somehow devoured the sailors. Still, the resulting rampage through San Diego is very enjoyable to watch. It's a decent homage to older monster movies and sets itself apart from the core island sequences. My personal favourite moment was always the trailer being pushed over the cliff. Seeing Sarah narrowly escape the cracking window and watching the 3 characters hang on for dear life was always a thrill to watch. Later on, the chase through the long grass and the showdown at the compound were equally strong. There are too many close calls to count, even if you aren't fully invested in the players involved. The set pieces are quite good, but by contrast to the likeable characters of the first film, The Lost World is painfully average. Jeff Goldblum's performance takes an odd turn here, and it earned him some ridicule for his constant umming and ahhing. After nearly getting killed in the first film, and then having his reputation ruined by InGen for breaking their non-disclosure agreements, Jeff seems to overplay Ian Malcolm's nervous side. At times this does work, as he's the only returning character who experienced the dinosaurs firsthand, but he needed to balance this out with his persona in the original. Sarah Harding appears passionate about the dinosaurs at first, but nowadays I roll my eyes at how she doesn't take their danger seriously. Julianne Moore is a great actress, but her material is subpar throughout. Some fans have often cried foul at the dumb decisions made by the characters, whether it's Vince Vaughn leading the adult T-Rexes straight to the trailer, or taking away the hunter's bullets and removing their only means of defence. Ironically, the only cast member who stands out to me is the late Pete Postlethwaite as Roland. His rugged and forthright mannerisms make him more memorable than the main leads, even if he takes himself out of the movie by the end of the second act. The Lost World Jurassic Park became the second highest grossing film in 1997, despite making less than its predecessor. Surprisingly, it was also nominated for a couple of Razzie Awards. The tepid response and the sense of letdown left the series in an odd place. Where could it go after the ending and with no third novel from Crichton? It was eventually decided to scale the third film back considerably. Jurassic Park III, the hollow close to a trilogy. As the 2000s arrived, the Jurassic Park series was clearly running out of steam. Dinosaurs simply weren't as popular as they had been in the last decade, and the quality of the films was slowly slipping in the eyes of both fans and critics. I mostly remember Jurassic Park 3 from various VHS viewings before I received the trilogy box set on DVD. Director Joe Johnston had wanted to make a Jurassic Park movie for years, and jumped at the chance when Spielberg moved on. Jurassic Park 3 is the shortest and most direct film in the series. It ditches all the business with InGen and instead goes for a chase formula with Sam Neill's Dr. Grant at the helm. The plot repeats mistakes from the second film as early as the opening, as Eric Kirby and Ben paraglide close to Isla Sorna. Something, possibly the Spinosaurus, kills the men on the boat and the two become stranded. So begins another rescue mission, one that cooked up some controversy when it came out in 2001. Contrary to the fanbase reaction, I wasn't annoyed when the T-Rex fell to the Spinosaurus early in the film. This was the first time we had seen two dinosaurs battle it out in the series, and being larger and more adaptable than Tyrannosaurus, this carnivore would likely have come out on top if they met in the Cretaceous for real. From here, it's a fairly fast-moving flick, as the characters narrowly dodge danger. Another thread running through the plot is Alan's study of the velociraptors. The returning paleontologist is by far the best part of the film, as Sam Neill once again does a great job with the character. You connect with him right away thanks to his previous experience and mannerisms. The film's biggest problem by far is its supporting characters. They're either too shallow or too annoying throughout. Amanda Kirby, played by Tia Leone, is endlessly screaming and making boneheaded decisions, while her husband Paul, played by William H. Macy, is very indecisive for most of the plot. Making matters worse is how manipulative the Kirbys are beneath the surface. This couple lied to Dr. Grant about their assets, tricked him onto their flight to a dangerous island, and got 3 people killed in the process. Some might say that they're doing whatever it takes to find their son, and that the 3 men were mercenaries who signed up of their own accord, but it really doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Jurassic Park 3 wants you to believe that the Kirbys are a sympathetic bunch who are slowly rebuilding their family unit, but this is constantly butting heads with the initial motivation. Still, their son Eric fares better. Striking a good balance between fear and resourcefulness, Trevor Morgan is well suited to the role. The scenes between him and Dr. Grant are very well done. You can tell they have a lot of respect for each other as the story goes on. Sadly, this dynamic can't make up for other problems. Until the arrival of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, this was widely regarded as the weakest entry in the series. When the dinosaurs are on screen, it offers some entertainment through its set pieces. The attacks from the Spinosaurus, the struggle against the pteranodons in the birdcage, and the ever-present raptor pack are all well done for the most part. Each of these scenes has its own unique atmosphere and suspense. It's too bad nearly everything else is so underwhelming, with the ending being arguably the biggest example. It clunks to an end once the survivors escape from the raptors and the military shows up afterwards. Jurassic Park 3 did make its budget back, but it still ranks as the lowest grossing film of the series. In many ways, it heralded the exit of dinosaurs from pop culture and the franchise's fade into obscurity. Outside of some video games, the series would go into hibernation until the middle of the 2010s. Jurassic World, the modern revival. Over a decade after the last production, word started circulating around the franchise's return. Ideas for a 4th Jurassic Park film had been floating around for some time, with suggestions of the original cast reprising their roles. One theory I always had involved the can of dino DNA lost on Isla Nublar. What if the genetic material leaked into the river and caused all kinds of mutations in the animals? What we got in 2015 leaned into this idea a little bit, with Colin Trevorrow in the director's chair. It was also the first entry I saw in theatres, and I recall enjoying it well enough. Later critiques have placed it in mediocre territory. It was inevitable that the film would go down the full CGI route to recreate the dinosaurs, and what we get is a large-scale spectacle. Jurassic World ignores the events of The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, instead choosing to imagine the park fully open and operational. It's a neat concept that expands the scale while still putting the creatures front and centre. Making use of modern CGI, the film bursts with fancy hardware, its higher budget put to work. The new gadgets and attractions look pretty nifty in the first act, and vehicles like the gyrosphere make for a solid update. But even with the park being filled to burst with guests, it's not enough for the greedy powers at the park's new owner, as we're introduced to the latest attraction. The Indominus Rex is the film's attempt to strike out in a different direction, and it's a novel if underdeveloped threat. At many points this genetic creation is a mean and dangerous animal, but further down the line it becomes a bit of a plot device to drive the action along. The ability to both camouflage and communicate with the raptors both pop up out of nowhere. Running alongside these encounters is the use of dinosaurs for military purposes. This is definitely the weakest aspect of the production. Training the long-established raptors to follow orders is already pushing the suspension of disbelief, but there's no way you would ever see them in a war zone. Being a modern blockbuster, general audiences let it slip, but it does muddle the overall focus. Jurassic World falls in with other contemporaries by casting widely recognised faces to play the characters. Chris Pratt has become quite the superstar over the last decade. After his appearance in Guardians of the Galaxy, every major studio wanted him on side. He gets the job done well enough as Owen Brady, taming raptors and riding his motorbike like a champ. Bryce Dallas Howard is also quite standard. Her performance as Claire Dearing is remembered more for its awkward moments than actual character work, like adjusting her outfit for the jungle or running in heels. The child actors aren't too bad, but they do get in the way at several moments, most notably when they stop the movie to talk about their parents' divorce. The original Jurassic Park got by without this added baggage, keeping the story firmly focused on the island and the failure of the security systems. Ultimately, the biggest problem with the new cast is how they never grow beyond their initial archetypes, making them feel like generic placeholders and weakening the chemistry. Jurassic World was quite the resurgence for the once dormant property, with a renewed push for merchandise, video games and expanded fiction. Crossing the 1 billion mark once again, Jurassic Park had now planted itself near the top of the blockbuster pantheon. Alongside the return of Star Wars and Harry Potter, it spearheaded the push to bring back older classics and appeal to nostalgia. However, this did come at a cost, namely the lack of heart and an unoriginal approach to story and characters. These issues would only be exacerbated by the fifth entry 3 years later. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, the tedious downturn. With the successful return of the series, Universal once again pushed for another set of sequels. The best thing I can say about Fallen Kingdom is that it doesn't bloat itself to ridiculous levels, unlike other franchises. But for the most part, the fifth film is an utter mess. Directed by J.A. Bayona, it veers straight into corporate tomfoolery. Having seen the first film, I went into this one wondering where the sequel would go. Needless to say, I wasn't impressed. The first half takes a little while to get moving, as the cast returns to the island to rescue the dinosaurs from an impending catastrophe. A few discussions and disagreements later, we're placed into the grand set piece, escaping from a volcanic eruption and the ensuing stampede. In terms of spectacle, this is as good as things get, with an underwater escape from the gyrosphere adding a bit of tension. The story then shifts in a very baffling direction to a wealthier state. In short, Fallen Kingdom takes a plot thread that was already poorly thought out and made it worse. This whole sequence of rich billionaires bidding for dinosaurs is ridiculously contrived and cartoonish. If it wasn't for the rampaging reptiles, Fallen Kingdom would have almost nothing, yet even this feels incredibly limited. In previous films, you could at least count on the varied creatures for multiple set pieces. Here, it all boils down to running around a mansion while being chased by the Indoraptor, which feels like a massive regression with the film's large budget. Making matters worse is how many elements are just thrown in there for marquee value. The Mosasaur escapes in the film's opening and isn't seen again until the end, and Jeff Goldblum shows up for about 5 minutes to talk in a court hearing. It's obvious Dr. Malcolm was added in with no care or effort, though seemingly he has a bigger role to play in the next film. Most of the returning cast are simply along for the ride. They haven't changed one bit since the first Jurassic World and feel incredibly stale as a result. Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard essentially repeat the same arc they went through in the first film, and the new characters, to put it bluntly, they suck. Did anyone ask for a nerdy hacker with a high-pitched scream? How about an environmentalist who spends a good portion of the runtime cuffed to a post? Even Kevin Wheatley is practically a repeat of Vic Hoskins from the previous film, only this time he likes collecting dinosaur teeth for some reason. They don't contribute anything to the bigger picture, and the same is true of Maisie, played by Isabella Sermon. Apparently she's also a clone, and is only there as an obligation to include children in the film. The fact that she releases the dinosaurs into the wild at the end, saying, "They're like me," is the film's final insult. It's a flimsy link to the next film, but the villains fare much worse. Reducing almost every one of them to rich businessmen in suits is insanely generic and unimaginative. It's interesting how, much like other big-name franchises, Jurassic Park suffered a serious downturn in the eyes of both fans and critics. Alongside Star Wars: The Last Jedi and Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, it triggered a serious backlash across the community. With its pitiful story and lackluster characterization, Fallen Kingdom took its place at the bottom of the franchise, yet it still made over $1.5 billion and stands as the 13th highest grossing film of all time. This is one instance where reviews hardly made a dent on commercial performance. and Universal quickly pushed on to the third and final entry in the rebooted property. Following multiple delays from the pandemic, in June 2022 we're reaching the end of the second trilogy with Jurassic World Dominion. With the genetically modified dinosaurs mostly abandoned, we're now being treated to a world where dinosaurs and humans are forced to coexist. Dominion is laying every last card on the table, piling on several plot threads and bringing back old faces like Sam Neill and Laura Dern to expand things even further. Aiming to go out with the biggest bang, it's sure to find success with general audiences, but on a critical level, the diminishing returns are likely to continue. Perhaps that's the ultimate fate of Jurassic Park as a series. Once the initial wonder of the first film passed on, the sequels were facing a never-ending uphill battle. They've had to rely on dinosaur carnage and spectacle alone to make profits. It's a successful formula, but a far cry from what made the 1993 original so engaging. Thanks for watching. The Jurassic Park franchise has maintained its popularity while also falling prey to some of the worst excesses of modern blockbusters. What are your experiences with the series? Which release was your favourite? Let me know in the comments below. You'll find my review of Jurassic World Dominion very soon.